Well, the Supreme Court has heard oral arguments in three significant cases regarding President Trump. Two cases have consolidated. They focus on the president's blocking congressional and state subpoenas to his accounting firm and banks for years of financial records. The third case concerns a criminal investigation into his business dealings and hush money paid to two women that he allegedly had affairs with before the 2016 election. Oral arguments were heard by teleconference due to the pandemic. For more, I want to bring in Ilya Shapiro. He's the director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute. Ilya, thank you for joining us. Take us back for a second, a few years here. Remind us again why President Trump's financial records are so highly sought out at this point, and who really wants access to them?
Well, two different reasons. One is the Russia probe, the subject of the Mueller investigation, and whether there was improper influence somehow in the Trump presidential campaign or other election tampering. That's what the House Intelligence and Oversight and Financial Services Committees are looking at. And then the allegations of hush money paid to women that President Trump allegedly slept with and paid off. And that's an investigation in terms of campaign finance and other improprieties by the New York City district attorney. And they've levied similar subpoenas to President Trump's accounting and finance firms, not to the president directly, but the president has moved to block those subpoenas.
What is the argument that the president's attorneys are making about shielding the president's financial records from Congress and also from New York investigators?
Well, it's twofold. First is the powers of these entities that are seeking the information. First, does the House just have an unlimited power to go fishing into the president or any other particular individual? The standard is the House needs a legislative purpose, but as came out during oral argument this morning, that can be very broad. You can make a case study out of some official and say that you need that information for that. So, like, what is the limiting principle of that legislative purpose? Similarly, with the DA, is this just a fishing expedition, or how closely to a criminal investigation does something have to be? Does a subpoena have to be valid? And the flip side of that, kind of how much power do you have, both the House and the DA, is the protection of the individual, saying that this is intruding into my rights, into my personal affairs, and the government or the House in one case and the DA in the other doesn't have enough power. And with the DA as well, there's a further kind of federalism angle where, of course, it's a state entity, state prosecutors seeking information from the head of the federal executive branch.
What would you say were some of the major questions that were asked by justices today? What questions do you think they should have asked that maybe they didn't?
Well, it was, I guess, about 3 hours, more than 3 hours of argument total. So they got a lot of questions, and all the justices were asking a lot. It's all about the limiting principle and how you draw the line between a legitimate legislative purpose on the one hand with the House, or a criminal investigative purpose with the DA, and the functioning of the presidency. How much of a burden is it on the president to have to respond to these kinds of allegations? Unprecedented ones, really. The precedent that we have is with Richard Nixon. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that he had to turn over tape recordings from the Oval Office, but that was part of a criminal and impeachment investigation. And then Clinton versus Jones, where the court ruled that the president was not immune from a civil lawsuit. And after that, that's what the Lewinsky affair came out of, from some certain testimony that he gave during that investigation. But that's different than either a House subpoena or a state criminal investigation. So again, it's how do you draw that line? Justice Breyer, Justice Kavanaugh, how do you balance these burdens between Article 2, the executive branch of the federal government, and on the one house, the congressional power and the state interest in investigating crime?
So, Ilya, as you look forward, what type of precedent might the Supreme Court's decision in this case set? And do you think that it could fundamentally change our system when it comes to checks and balances?
I think they're looking for a narrow ruling, whoever wins. They don't either want to give absolute immunity to the president from either House investigation or or state criminal investigation. But neither do they want to allow a plenary fishing expedition by either of these types of government entities. So I would look for a narrow ruling. Perhaps they'll draw some sort of standard and throw it back to the trial court to figure out whether these particular subpoenas meet that standard, kicking the can down the road. And potentially, if President Trump is not reelected, once he becomes a private citizen, the scope of this investigation, the legal balance looks a lot different.
Ilya Shapiro. Ilya, I gotta say, it's just fascinating, this whole concept of teleconferencing with the justices. I don't know what it is, but it's just this old school institution that has done things only one way, and even in the midst of a pandemic, they too have had to rethink how they approach their cases.
It sounds very differently, and not just the fact that they're doing it by teleconference, which has imposed a certain order. They ask in order by seniority rather than kind of all jumping in on top of each other, and that's allowed, as many people have noticed, Justice Thomas, who typically is silent, has probably asked as many questions in the last 2 weeks as he has in the previous 2 decades on the court. But beyond that kind of structure, we can hear all this in a live audio stream. We've never had live streaming audio or video. And that's, for someone who follows the court, for someone who's interested in a particular legal, whether it's the subpoenas today or freedom of religion, other types of cases that have come up, it's been really fascinating to listen, not to watch. We can't see anything.
That's right. We still can't see anything, but it is so fascinating. And I encourage anyone, if you have the time, it's worth sort of seeing it all unfold in a way we don't normally get to. Ilya, thank you again for joining us. Ilya Shapiro.
My pleasure.
And a reminder, CBSN will second stream Supreme Court oral arguments tomorrow. So you can hear all of this at cbsnews.com beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern.